Nolan Bushnell, welcome to the conversation.
Alex, great to be here.
I want to go back a little bit to the time when you were named as one of the 50 men that changed America. At that moment, was that pause for reflection to think, wow, it's been this impactful?
Yeah, I was quite proud of that. But I felt, hey, they got to do better than that.
Now, let's go back to childhood. Of course, Dad was a cement contractor. Mum was working at home at the time. And you were, I think, the only boy in the family who was very creative. And I think strawberries became an issue at about 8.
I started my entrepreneurial career very young.
What do you remember as being the first thoughts about why selling strawberries door to door?
I was with my mother in the grocery store, and I noticed strawberries for what to me as a kid was like 50 cents a basket. And I thought, that's a huge amount of money. And I knew that we had a garden full of strawberries. And so I said, there's an opportunity here. And so I went out, picked the strawberries, got a bunch of the little baskets, took them door to door. And I made like 20 weeks of allowance in a morning. I was hooked.
And it's interesting, it's a momentum thing, but of course, at some point you had as I understand it, a crush on one of your teachers and you wanted to be noticed. So you created this electronic jacket.
Right.
Which nearly killed you or something like that.
The electric jacket was something that I thought was very important because you'd walk home in dark and that sort of thing. And of course, I sold 0 of them. But I did get an overload one time and I didn't almost kill myself. I just caught the jacket on fire.
But this curiosity and this creativity, I guess Dad's business, he had tools and equipment around the place. Did that contribute to your willingness to try things?
I think that having stuff and tools is always helpful if you're a tinkerer. And I think that my early curiosity about electricity, which led to ham radio, like if you were a geek in the 50s, you were into ham radio. And I think that that furthered my entrepreneurial quest because the transmitters and the radios were very expensive.
Yes.
And so that's when I set up my TV repair business. And
how old were you then?
11. And in those days, TVs were very expensive, and so to let an 11-year-old kid in the back of your television took a certain leap of faith. But I decided to totally undercut the competition with 50-cent house calls, where the market was $5, and I created a good business.
But of course, as happens in all lives, I guess, tragedy beset you at about 15 when your dad passed away.
That's correct.
How do you remember that impacting you at that time? Because clearly you were living a child life, right? A curious child life, and then bang, reality hits.
Well, I had worked with my dad prior to his death, and I knew everything about his business, and I was actually responsible. He died in August, and I didn't have to go to school until September. And so I actually ran the crew at 15 and closed down his business. My dad was, everything to me, and one of my big regrets is that my dad didn't live to see my later on success.
Yeah. Now, of course, today you are a married man with 8 children, and they're all tech savvy. Was this some sort of plot to prepare them for the future of the world?
A little bit. I wanted them all to be creative and independent and to make a difference in some ways. And I think they all did that.
So let's move back to before what I call the breeding program that you set yourself on with 8 children. Back to university. And in 1965, your frat brother wanted to meet you at 1 o'clock in the morning to blow your socks off, as I understand you quote yourself.
Yes.
What was it that he was showing you? Because you speak of it as a transformative moment.
It was, by all definitions of the word, an epiphany.
Right.
And I went into the lab, and there on a screen was the game Space War. Space War was done by a guy named Steve Russell at MIT 3 years before. But I'd never heard of it, and I saw it then. And coincidentally, I was manager of the games department at Lagoon, a local amusement park, summers, and that was one of the ways I was putting myself through college. And I knew that if I had that screen in my arcades, it would make money. I knew it.
Yes.
But then you do the math, and then, you know, $1 million computer and 25 cents a play, and the math didn't work.
No.
But I knew the cost of computing was constantly coming down, and I knew that the curve was going to cross at some point. And it did.
In 72, which is not long after uni, you form Atari. What was life like for you in 72 as this was unfolding?
I thought that I could create a game, put it in a box, put it in a cabinet, and sell them. And the thing that was very interesting to me is I decided that I would be a studio. I would design games, but I'd let other people manufacture them. And so I licensed my first game, Computer Space, to Nutting Associates. Then the hand of fate gave me a fact that Nutting were a bunch of incompetents. And they gave me the confidence that, you know, you can't possibly mess it up more than these bozos. And I think that that on my second game, I said, I'm not going to license it to these guys. I'm going to go into business for myself.
In 72, which is not long after uni, you form Atari, and in walks Steve Jobs. What were your first impressions?
Steve had one speed, full speed ahead, extremely passionate. And I always felt that if you had passionate people in your business, that everything else was trainable. And it turned out to be true. He became a valuable part of the company. And in fact, he and Wozniak actually did Breakout, which was a massive success for Atari.
We look at life from various vantage points, and when people recount theirs, they often do it through rose-coloured glasses, but you don't. You have a very holistic retrospective of your life. And here's this moment where Steve Jobs says to you, look, I'm about to form Apple Computers. Do you want a third of it for 50 grand?
I liked Steve. I respected Steve. I thought that he had the ability at that point in time to be a CEO at exactly zero. And so I thought that a personal computer, and I thought that Wozniak could definitely create something that was world-shaking. But I didn't feel like there was any there in terms of management. You got to understand about Steve. Steve was an extremely hard worker, and the time of day and what have you didn't matter. And I think sometimes, I'm not sure about this, but I actually think Steve was living there.
Is that right?
And so people used to complain that he didn't smell that well. And of course, our plant didn't have showers then. Today, we always have showers in our place just for that purpose. But I'd come in on a weekend and he'd be there. I'd come in, late at night and he'd be there. I didn't see the bad Steve Jobs. But he caused enough problems that I sort of put him on the engineering night shift, of which it didn't exist. He was the first member of that.
And when Steve went to Apple, and Steve Wozniak obviously joined him, there were certain ingredients, if you like, from Atari that went across as part of the early phase of Apple. Walk me through that.
We decided that we were going to create a brand new kind of company. And the rule was focus on outcomes, not process. And that led to, we don't care when you come to work, we don't care if you come to work, get your job done, we're happy. That translated into, we don't care what you wear to work. And so when Atari started, an engineer, when I was working at Ampex and that, I wore a coat and tie to work every day as an engineer because we were professionals. And so any engineer that wears T-shirts and jeans to work today have me to thank, because that ethic moved on to Apple. And then because in Silicon Valley, between Atari and Apple, we were probably at 20% of the workforce. And people were looking at us growing like weeds and says, well, maybe we have to do that. And plus, our casual lifestyle, and it was really work hard, play hard. We had beer busts on the shipping dock on Fridays and things like that. That was a recruiting tool. We could literally steal the best engineers from any company in the world, including Intel and Fairchild and Hewlett-Packard. You know, we were the place to work.
Now, Atari's reaching greater heights and you're needing more capital and the offer comes, and I'm interested in your perspective on this because here you are at the height of your game and this offer comes of 20, 28, 30 million in the 70s, which was extraordinary money.
Right.
You take it from Warner and you've recounted that as being the baby you should never have let go of.
People at Warner, they were all record guys, and they didn't understand that it was more than just the cartridge business. They saw the cartridge business as records. They weren't game players.
No.
They were marketeers and all that. And the company just went way off the rails. And I was really sad about that.
Your strength's been your focus, but periodically you'd go to the next idea, and Chuck E. Cheese was a classic.
Right.
Where you had this idea of combining, I guess, pizzas and food and gaming. The concept worked well. You then brought in an executive manager in the early 80s, which doesn't appear to have worked historically, reviewing it.
Yeah.
What do you reflect on that? Did you get your eye off the ball, or would you have done it differently looking at it now?
Oh, I definitely would have. Once I decided that it was time to get quote-unquote professional managers in, I really just should have sold the company.
To the word entrepreneurship, it's such a buzzword these days.
Right.
And everyone has a view of exactly what it is. In a short sentence, in your mind, what's entrepreneurship?
It's the way you feel about payday. If you look forward to a payday, you're an employee. If you hate the idea of a payday, you're an entrepreneur.
So are you born, or can you be morphed into an entrepreneur?
This is the golden age of entrepreneurship. Things like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, the crowdfunding platforms. Anybody watching this program can get up in the morning and say, I'm going to start a company and be an entrepreneur that fast. The world has more entrepreneurial opportunities today than ever before. And then you add into that the fact that the world is moving so fast that there's all these cracks that need to be filled by clever ideas. I mean, in the next 20 years, when the self-driving car comes in, it's going to eliminate probably 20% of the workforce in every country. That 20% of the workforce needs to figure out ways to fill in the cracks that self-driving cars are going to create, because all of a sudden the world will be very different. And it's going to be better, but it's going to be different.
To the budding entrepreneur, who can be any age these days,
right,
who may be watching, how do you get the balance right between perhaps leaving too early, it's a bit like courtship, leaving too early on a project or staying too long? You've had lots of life experience. Is there a few sets of words that give people a sense to look for that balance of knowing when?
I am 100% the wrong person to ask for that, because I've always gotten it wrong. It's very, very hard.
It is, isn't it?
It's always a judgment call, and I think you'll always get it wrong.
Yeah. It's interesting. I look at Richard Branson, who, as you know, is now seeking space as the next frontier, which is ironic given that it all happened in the 60s.
Right.
To me, that's a classic entrepreneurial quiz, that he's done all of these fantastic things and he's got the momentum. And I guess like a child who's got a short attention span, has achieved so many things, decides on the next big game.
Right.
Is there a challenge amongst entrepreneurs of saying enough? Enough of the really big ideas and the really big risk-taking? Is there a danger to themselves?
Absolutely. But we're a little bit of business adrenaline junkies.
I've noticed.
No, really.
Yeah.
And we get used to the exhilaration of doing something truly remarkable and truly fun. And it's not about adulation. No. It's about keeping ourselves fascinated. I know that sounds very...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's crazy, but...
But it's almost keeping your childlike mind. I got called in every school report disruptive.
Oh, yeah.
finally the world now refers to me as a disruptive CEO as if it's a new idea. Well, I knew how to do that at 10, right? Yeah. But it's how you, I guess, bring that into a corporate world without totally distracting where it's going, but bringing the best out of each individual.
Yeah. One of my current pet peeves is that right now, the most destructive force in the world is classical education. The schools worldwide are horrible for creating the citizens of the future. And it's all about teachers, tenure, process, system, not about the kids.
And it's interesting because you don't just say things, you try and do things about them. And
right.
Of course, your new venture is about addressing and attacking that in some ways. What are you trying to achieve and where are you on that journey?
What I'm really trying to do is understand, how does the brain learn? Like, I'm working on a book right now that I call Mind Hacks, where how do you really hack your own brain and open it up so that you can just pour data in and it stays and that's one of the things that BrainRush is doing. We've created Play to Mastery. We've created a series of algorithms that are very effective. Can teach you about 10 times faster than a classroom. Kids are very adaptive. How can I get through this as easily as possible so that I can get to what I really want to do outside with my buddies?
Yes.
And Play to Mastery sort of flips that and says, you don't get out of here until you know it all 100%. Sorry, guy. And all of a sudden, that's a whole attitudinal difference.
So what else have you got in development at the moment?
Well, in my office right now, I have a walking treadmill desk. Part of my brain research has said that you can be much more effective if you're walking while you're working. Sitting is the new smoking. We've done a treadmill that is totally silent, that's very short, so you can actually fold it up under your desk. You are going to be a better worker if you're moving than if you're sitting.
I've seen many angry old people of male and female gender.
Right.
And I do my own little research on that in my head, and it seems to me to be a discomfort with the way they've lived their life. And to me, I guess, if the man is still the boy, you've got a very good chance of being happy at stages in your life. How much more balanced are you than you were as the young entrepreneur at Atari, fighting to make your name?
Massively more balanced. In the early days of Atari, when you've not done it before, your only standard is, I have to work as hard as I can because this may be my only shot, and I don't know how hard I have to work in order to be successful. And as a result, you tend to really sacrifice family and leisure time and a lot of stuff. And I think that it's very easy when you're in that mode to lose perspective.
Yes.
I've often said that I possibly would not have sold Atari if I'd have just taken a 2-week vacation. Because part of it was actually fatigue. I mean, intellectual fatigue of fighting for, cash flow and market share. And I had a very good team around me, but we were just growing so fast and solving such new problems all the time that it just, the whole thought of, I can get a lot of money and they're going to take all my problems away? Maybe so. and I think we have to require almost the people in our company to take an occasional vacation, because perspective is really, really important. Yes. And I think that if you work too hard, you lose it.
Pong collected a very large generation that still remembers it with great fondness.
Right.
What are you doing in theatre? I'm hearing stories about theatre and Pong.
I feel like I have to do something very, very different every few years. And I said, produce a musical,
Why not?
Theatrical, why not? And so I then decided, okay, what's the theme? And the theme was going to be Pong. And the whole idea that it's going to be the Pong ball, the Pong square, if you would, and his journey to become cool and become round. And it's also a journey through the video game business, all the way from the blocky nature of the technology at the time, black and white, up through today where you have photorealism and hoo-ha going no matter which way.
I have many theories. One of them is wisdom's a collection of experiences, so you have to be wise, given my theory on it. But secondly, I think it's so important as you move into your next phase of life that you're comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah.
And it's holistic in its nature, and I think that's when you become the great teacher. So thank you for today, and it's been a delight, and I'm sure our viewers will think much more about their potential. Thanks, Nolan.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you.